All right, seeing some people filter in. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute at the top of the hour, but thank you so much for joining us. And we'll get started in just a second. All right, we're going to let everybody filter in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone who's joined us so far. I know I'm sure we'll have a couple people filter on in here in a little bit, but for those of you who have not joined us at a webinar before, my name is Sammy Focarino. I'm the Senior Events Manager here at Consensus. I'll be the moderator for today's session. This webinar is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com. We've had a great time at our events this year so far. We had DemoFest X West Coast in San Francisco in March, and our largest virtual event, DemoFest, in May, which Lori here actually keynoted at that event. We're very excited to be working towards our next events coming up in Dublin in September, London in October, and New York City in November. You can register for any of these events at demofest.com, which I will also post in the chat. We encourage you to participate in today's webinar. We'll have some polls throughout, so definitely participate in those. Lori will also answer questions at the close of the session, but you're welcome to post your questions at any time through the Q&A box. We definitely recommend posting your questions through that Q&A box and also engaging with us through the chat as well. But if you have those questions, again, make sure to drop them in Q&A so they don't get lost in the chat. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, press the help button on the right side of your screen. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Lori Payne is currently the Global Vice President of Presales at Blackline, a cloud software solution automating critical accounting processes. Lori has been in the software industry for over 25 years, leading teams for over 10 years. For Lori, none of the roles she's held in her software career hold a light to her love of presales. Lori is an open, transparent leader with a passion for increasing growth mindsets of those around her, advocating for her team, and encouraging more women in tech to pursue their goals. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Lori.
Thank you, Sammy. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. So let's go ahead and warm up the chat because we're going to be pretty interactive in this session. So go ahead and chime in with where you are listening in from. I am outside of the Denver, Colorado area. Oh, we have folks from the UK on. Awesome. Good afternoon. I like it. In Paris. Let's go visit you in Paris. This is great. I love it outside of Boston. I grew up in Massachusetts. That's awesome. Thank you everyone for joining. And Sammy, thank you for that great introduction. I am really excited to be here and partnering with Consensus again on another really important topic. I'm glad that you guys could all carve out some time today and sit through this with me. In our pre-sales community and even beyond our pre-sales community, we know there is just an incredible amount of change that is happening to us, around us, impacting us. Some of it good change and some of it maybe not so great. So today we are going to talk about how to navigate that change and successfully pull your teams and lead them through to the other side of that change, which is generally much more success. So Sammy did a great introduction here. I'll add a little bit more color here. Yes, I am Lori Payne, and I have been in the software industry for a really long time, over 25 years. I do run a global team of pre-sales resources here at Blackline, as Sammy mentioned, and I have had actually quite a few different roles in my career in software. I actually got my start as a software developer, and then I actually asked to move into a pre-sales role way back early in my career. And this is way before they even had anything like pre-sales academies. And I was told, no, I couldn't move into pre-sales because you didn't have the right experience. So I moved into professional services for quite a few years to really gain that experience. That was back in really software on-premise days where it was cutover weekends and go live weekends. And thinking back, it was really torturous at times, but it worked. It got me the experience I needed to move into pre-sales. And then I had a couple of different roles in between in product management, and I tried my hand at selling software directly, but I came back to pre-sales because, well, as you all know, it is truly the best place to be in the software industry. It did take me a little bit to realize that I wanted to lead teams and have more of an impact on an individual's path. And I had plenty of experience to draw from and to relate to the challenges of that individual contributor role. So I felt that, pretty far into my career, it was time to start leading teams. One of the things I truly enjoy is reflecting on someone's journey and celebrating just how far that individual has come in their own path. And Sammy mentioned this too. I'm a very transparent leader, and I am a strong advocate for my team and those around me. I am a mom. Sammy and I were talking about my daughter right before we jumped on the webinar. So that just means I'm in that constant battle of life work integration. My daughter is 11, and I think a lot of what I do in my professional career and working with women in tech really sets the stage for her success later in life, whether she chooses to enter into that technology field or not. Of course, I'm hopeful that she does, but she's going to choose her own path. All right, we told you this was going to be very interactive. To give me a good sense of who we have in the audience, let's go ahead and launch our first poll. And that is around really, how long have you been in that people leader role? Are you new to it and less than a year in? If you're an individual contributor, go ahead and mark that. I think it's really important for individual contributors to understand that you can lead from where you are. So I'm happy that you are consuming this information as well. This is awesome. Yeah, and if you've been leading for 4+ years, you've been tested. You've led in good times, and there's a difference between leading in good times versus leading in some of our challenging times. Leading in good times, you may have been experiencing hyper growth in your organization and trying to staff a team to support that. And that's a very different challenge than leading in maybe some down economic times like some of us are experiencing, where we're having to say goodbye to some really good, talented people. That's challenging, right? Sometimes we have to run those cutbacks. And I bet some of you, looks like even started leading teams even during the pandemic, which is a completely different experience. And you likely don't have anything else to compare it to. Okay, thanks for that, Sammy. So either way, whether you've been leading teams for quite some time, and we've really got the gamut here, which is really wonderful to see. There's challenges and changes no matter where you are in that career. And it's really coming down to how you navigate them as a leader or as that individual contributor, how you lead your fellow teammates through that, right? You can lead from where you are. All of the changes we go through fall within generally one of these 6 categories, right? These are categorically 6 organizational changes that we all experience in our respective organizations. So generally, everything's going to fit into one of these 6 buckets. So strategic changes are generally driven by your C-level executives, and they are oftentimes really handed down to the individual departments to be executed against. So an example of that would be, a change in company goals or change in objectives, or in our world, possibly even a decision to buy technology versus build technology and acquire an organization. That is considered a strategic change. People-centric changes have the most impact on our teams, on our employees. So activities like hiring, right? That impacts the team, or an HR policy change, they fit into this category. Now, there's often times a lot of overlap between people-centric changes and structural changes, where we see things like a major shift in management structure or the chain of command changes, and that alters how teams are organized. And sometimes that happens as a result of an acquisition that may have happened from a strategic change. So there can be overlap in here. And I've been in organizations that have been acquired. I've been in organizations that have done the acquiring. And if you've been in that seat really on either side of that transaction, there is a large amount of change that causes a high level of uncertainty, and that needs to be properly navigated, which is why we're here today. So we'll get into those details in a little bit. So the technological changes they're really straightforward to identify. It's the introduction of new systems or new software that is meant to improve the business. And, we're sitting here in a consensus webinar, right? So anyone who has implemented consensus has fallen into this category. Years ago, we moved from WebEx as our meeting platform to Microsoft Teams. And I can confirm that level of resistance to even make a change like that was pretty high. Yet we did the shift, and here we are years later. We navigated that change, and everyone has adjusted to Teams, and we are operating just fine. But it needs to be navigated. It needs to be led. An easy unplanned change to identify is when, as an example, when we're all forced to close the office doors and go work remotely. That was a big unplanned change, but unplanned changes can be simpler as well. Something more simpler would be like an unplanned employee attrition, someone who leaves your team or your organization that you didn't know that was going to happen. They maybe were one of your rock star pre-sales resources, and now you're having to correct that. And lastly, we've got remedial changes on here. Remedial change is something that just needs to be solved, right? We've identified a problem and we need to fix it. So a great example for this audience would be, you notice someone has a skills gap, and then you create a plan to upskill in that area. That is a remedial change. Simple one. As leaders, we must lead that change, even when it originates from someone other than us, right? An outside consultant or economic turmoil, such as a little bit of what we're experiencing now, is forcing change upon us. Or our competitors have stepped up their game and we're forced to make some go-to-market changes. Those are outside factors that sometimes cause us to need to pivot and make a change. Sometimes big, impactful changes are handed down to you and you're asked to navigate them. But then you have to become the voice of that change for your team. And it's up to you to lead the way and lead the team through that change. As you can tell, right, there's a lot of change. We're constantly bombarded with change. That's why that old saying exists. The only thing that is constant is change. But it takes a toll on everyone. It's exhausting. It has had an impact over the past several years. And more change is coming. Change is inevitable. Businesses are constantly evolving. So we've hit a wall a little bit coming out of the pandemic. The workforce has hit a wall. We're exhausted. And that's not just my opinion, right? So Gartner has released a survey that revealed employees' willingness to support enterprise change fell to 43% in 2022. Okay, but compare that to where it was in 2016 at 74%. So what that is telling us is less than half of our employees are willing to support more change. That's a problem. Now, Gartner cited the pandemic as a major cause for the drop in that support and the willingness to support that change, because we asked a lot of our employees during the pandemic. Things were constantly changing. Organizations were trying to pivot to do what was right and meet the rules and regulations of the global environment, right? Every country ended up having their own rules and regulations that needed to be followed during that. And we as leaders had to navigate all of that at the turn of a dime. Things were changing very quickly and weekly and sometimes daily. So we've hit a wall when it comes to change and accepting that change and being willing to put in the effort to make that change. So there's a lot of research out there on that, on change, organizational change and driving it and leading it in general. One of the things that I read was a Harvard Business Review article on organizational change, and it did cite that in 2022, the average employee went through 10 enterprise changes, 10 in 1 year. So those were things like a restructure to achieve more efficiencies, cultural transformations to figure out new ways of working in this crazy environment. So things like our hybrid working environment, or even the introduction of new technology, right? We did a lot of that ourselves and trying to become more efficient throughout things like the pandemic. 10 changes. That's a lot of change for people to navigate and to accept and to pivot in. All of these organizational changes are emotional roller coasters for our teams. And I like the curve on here because it does kind of look like a roller coaster, because this is really the ride of emotions that we go through. So humans, by nature, we're very emotional beings. There's no way of getting around it. We often talk about the sales cycle and the buying cycle being highly charged and emotional, just because we're humans. And for us, in talking about change, we are naturally resistant to change. And as a result, we go through this whole host of emotions before we can get our head wrapped around this change and get on board with it. As leaders, part of our challenge is no two people respond to change in the same way or move through this change cycle at the same rate. So we have to figure out where our teams are. Are they still resisting? Are they trying to adopt and get on board with this change? Have they fully adopted it and now they're performing better as a result of the change? Where are they? Where's your team? Now, as a leader, we also have even an added challenge, right? You have to go through this same emotional process. The difference is you kind of have to do it on a faster pace so that you can lead your team through this change curve. To effectively lead through change, you as a leader, you have to shift your mindset from one of, I'm going to control and contain this change for my team, to something more along the lines of, I am going to champion this change for my team, which can be, admittedly, very difficult to do, particularly when you're impacted by that change. But there is a mindset shift that you need to make to get your team through that. We've obviously have gone through lots of change here at Blackline too, no different than anyone else, right? We rolled out a go-to-market change that impacted our BDR organization, our sellers, pre-sales, our customer success team. And let's just say we started that rollout about 2 years ago. It's actually a little bit longer, but we'll say 2 for sake of our conversation today. We still have people sitting in that denial state of change. Doesn't apply to them. They don't see how it's going to work. I'm not going to do it. That's denial. But on the flip side of that, I have definitely witnessed people in our own pre-sales org here at Blackline move into that green acceptance area on the right-hand side, where I've seen great examples of solution consultants experimenting with this change, trying new things, and also deciding to fully adopt a change and lead it and pull people along with them to make that change. It is truly an amazing sight to behold, and we celebrate that success because not everyone is there. How do we move more people from the left-hand side of this curve all the way into that green and into the acceptance range of the change? Well, we're going to walk through and build out this slide. It takes a plan. And we're going to talk through 5 seemingly simple steps to lead through any change. And I say seemingly simple, I use those words on purpose because it can be challenging to master. Okay, so before I build out the slide, let's jump back into the chat, get some additional interaction here. What do you think is at least one of the steps in the plan? Go ahead and put a comment in the chat. So if you were planning a change rollout, what would be one step that you would include in your plan? We're going to walk through it. Incentives, communication, acknowledgement. Yep, where are we today? Let's acknowledge where we are. Setting expectations. Oh, James Glau, enablement. Hi, James. Great to see you on here. Transparency. Told you I'm a very big transparent leader. I believe in that. Measuring success. Hi, Kim Schreiber. Collaboration. Yes, we're big on collaboration. Executive sponsorship. These are all really great and amazing. They all fit into these 5 steps that we are going to talk about. All right. So first and foremost, communication. Communication was mentioned. I'm lost track of how many times, but communication is the key to everything, which really comes as no surprise to this audience. I know that. So just as we coach our pre-sales people to always be communicating the why to our buyers, we as leaders also need to communicate why a change is happening. Because understanding the why is an important part of getting people to accept the change. And I think one additional thing you can do as part of explaining the why is connecting it to the bigger picture, which in some cases, different levels of leadership may have visibility into that bigger picture, but maybe not your team of individual contributors. So connect it to the picture, paint that picture for them. And I saw transparency in here, right? So be as transparent as you can be. And there are sometimes things you can't change or communicate, I should say, but for everything that you can, be transparent in communicating that change. Express your excitement for that desired outcome of the change. And I say desired outcome because sometimes that change, the change itself could be difficult to navigate, but the other side of that change is going to be something really great for you and the team. So explain that. All right, we're going to come back to the chat. What do you think that communication can look like? What form can that take? Go ahead and put it in the chat. How would you communicate that change is happening? Town halls. Yep. Town halls are great to hit a wide global audience. One-on-ones, not email, do it live, team meetings. Yeah, not emails. Yeah, emails are not, this is not, when you're communicating a change that is impacting people, generally email is not, you don't want to take that impersonal approach, which sounds like everyone is in agreement too. I love the idea of starting at that high level, right, with a town hall. Some change communication may come from C-level. And then us as leaders, right, depending on where we sit in that organization, we will need to take that down to another level, right? So your team meetings, your one-on-ones, these are all great examples. And I see Jamie's comment here. Emails are a great backup to after you've announced that, right? So putting some things in writing, confirming understanding, that is real. Hi, Rosie, skip level meetings. Yes, these are all ways to communicate those change. Awesome. Okay, so now what, right? Now we have to listen, right? Remember that it's a roller coaster of emotions. Our previous slide showed that change curve that people go through, and it looks exactly like a roller coaster. So make space for people to move through all of those emotions. So most of us, right, generally, we don't like to be told what to do and how to do it. And this is a great step to listen to your team's ideas, get feedback on how to accomplish the change. Now, there's a distinction here. You're not getting feedback on whether or not the change is going to happen. The decision's been made, the change is happening, but you're going to get feedback on how they can participate in that change and maybe what they want the steps of that change to look like for your team or your organization. That's a distinct difference there. It's more about letting them participate in that change and having them be accountable for their part in it. Giving them some accountability and giving them a say in how that change is going to get rolled out helps them move through that cycle of the change curve. So there's also another Gartner study that has found that involving employees and letting them have a voice in that change increases your chances of a successful lasting change by 15%. Just by listening and letting them participate, right? So who wouldn't want to have a more impactful change increase by 15%? You definitely do. We use one-on-ones. We've done some, roundtables in the past to reach a wider audience, just to open up that floor and hear from people and understand where the field is at. And we've kind of already, I was going to ask for some more chat in here, but we've really already talked about some tactics that we've used to gather information. You can use anonymous surveys, right? Giving people some anonymity and giving you more direct feedback, and then you can take action on that. So great interaction here. All right, so you've communicated that the change is happening. You're listening, right? You've heard from the team. Now what? Now you enter a little bit of what I like to think of a mini cycle within this circle here that we're building out. And that's a mini cycle of sharing what the next steps are, what the action items are. And this is where you can't make assumptions. We don't assume that updates are making their way to the team. You, as the leader, are responsible for driving the updates and driving those communications to keep everyone in the know and engaged. On a larger scale change, it's okay not to have all the answers yet, right? We coach our people when they're in their software presentations to say, you know what, I don't know is an okay answer. Take that as a takeaway. The same thing applies here. It's easy enough to say, I don't have that answer yet. Let me go ask some people and find out, and I'll communicate back to the team. We don't want to make any assumptions, right? Bigger scale change is often evolving as senior executives are figuring it out too. We know the change is happening, but we don't necessarily have all of the details. All right, preparation. I like this one because you can be the most amazing leader ever to bless the offices of your organization, but you will still be met with some resistance to change. Any plan that you put together must account for challenges in getting the team behind the change. It's all very, very normal. So don't feel like you failed as a leader. Again, humans are very emotional beings, and we don't like to be told what to do or how to do it. As a leader, it is your job to kind of hit those conversations dead on. Just hit them straight on, own them. You've got to help those employees who are strongly resisting a change. You've got to help them move through that fear and resistance of those stages in that change curve. You got to do that pretty quickly, because the risk here is if you don't talk to them, right? If you don't get them to engage, they're going to disengage. And when people see a teammate disengaging, the other teammates tend to start to disengage. And then you've got a morale issue on your hands. So it's better to deal with those conversations head on. And you have to remember as a leader, like, these changes are impacting people personally, and they're fearful. Maybe they're fearful for how their role is going to change, or do they even still have a role left in the organization, depending on what economic times are impacting your organization. Keep them engaged, hear them out, give them some assurances, right? People like that psychological safety when it comes to knowing they still have a job moving forward. Of course, I have more statistics here for you. A recent study that was run by Gallup indicated that a very high percentage, 70% of a team's engagement is influenced by their manager. So if you're a people leader and you're engaged and you're driving change and you fully support it and you're expressing that, your team is going to be more apt to be on board with that too. So you really do influence more than maybe you even realize. Okay. So we've all been, met with some resistance at some point in our careers. Put a little note in the chat if that's happened to you recently and you've had to coach and navigate and work with a person in your organization through that resistance to help them work their way through it. Or put a little emoji in there or something. It's quiet in that chat. I know everyone has come up with some resistance. Yeah, great points being made in here. Yeah. All right, good. We won't wait on more of that. But okay, I know you have all been met with resistance. James, love your comment. Sometimes I was the resistance. Yeah, sometimes I resist things too, right? Because just because we're leaders doesn't mean we are exempt from that emotional change curve. We go through that too. So I should be dropping an emoji in there as well. All right, the last step. All right, celebration, right? Last but absolutely not least. In fact, this is probably the most important step of creating a plan to roll out change. You have to celebrate the successes. No matter, like, James, you distracted me. Yeah, 100,000 million%, whatever that number is, you got to celebrate it. No matter how big or small the wins related to the change are, you absolutely have to spotlight them. Absolutely, without a doubt. This will help your resistors move through the change cycle. And they're going to engage because they're going to wonder, what did my teammate do that got them that recognition? And then when they're going to understand what they did, they're going to say, oh, I can do that too. And now you've moved from resistance into closer steps to the acceptance stage. And that's what we want to do. Small steps forward are progress in any change rollout. If the team isn't aware the progress is happening and you're not communicating the celebration and the wins, they're going to start to wonder, why did we do this in the first place? Or what am I even doing with this change? We don't want people to revert back on that roller coaster of the change curve. We want them to move forward into that acceptance stage. This is the easiest step of this plan, so absolutely do not skip it. There are an incredible amount of ways to celebrate the successes. Sometimes we use internally here, we use our employee point systems, or we share emails, or we highlight someone on a team call. So go ahead, drop in the chat. What are some of the other ways that you guys use to recognize employees? This will help give you some ideas if things are maybe feeling stale inside your organization. You're always sending that same templated email. What do we do? Public recognition is always great. Oh, quarterly awards. Yeah. Yep. Ooh, happy hours. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, rewarding them with an event or a dinner. We've done that a couple of times too. Uber Eats, yes. Yeah, because we're all sitting at our desk all day. Yeah, kazoo points. Yep, exactly, Kim. Bravo points, that they're probably very similar to what Kim and I know as kazoo points. LinkedIn posts. I love, that's really, really a great example of public recognition in LinkedIn posts. This is awesome, right? Definitely, we do this pre-sales organizations, I think in general, are really great about recognizing employees for job well done on things like opportunities they work, but make sure when you're rolling out a change plan, you don't lose sight of these celebrations. Yeah. All right, so these are our 5 steps, right? Really seemingly simple 5 steps, right? Communicating, listening, sharing, preparing, and celebrating. Sometimes we think we're great at all of these, but often when you take a step back and reflect, you can see where as a leader or as a member of an organization, people are lacking. So Sammy, we've got one more poll to launch, right? So this poll is a simple question, right? What do you think is working well in your organization? Do you think you as a leader or your organization is great at communicating changes? Are you as a leader really great at pushing those down and helping the team navigate those? Are you great, or is your org great at giving them space to navigate the change? Do you accept their ideas and really seek employee input on how to execute that change? Yeah, select the things that you think are going well. And I know we all are great at celebrating success, but remember, do select that option in terms of if you think you're great in celebrating the success of whether or not you're doing that in terms of rolling out a change. Awesome. All right. Thank you for rolling that out, Sammy. So, I put that up there to really help you understand that there could be some areas that you're not great at. And truly that is okay. But it just tells you also that there's work to be done. And to help you continue in that work and closing those gaps of where you're maybe not so great, I have a little bit of homework for you, right? Of course, I know this audience is always up for a good book. I've got 3 up here to tell you about. Switch is a book written by 2 brothers. Their names are Chip and Dan Heath. And this book takes a deeper look into that emotional piece that we were talking about today, right? We're talking a lot about that emotional roller coaster. So they take a deeper dive into the emotional piece of change, and it helps you as a leader or even as an individual contributor recognizing yourself. It helps you understand the resistance that you are either feeling or your team is, or you will feel when you go to roll out that next change. They do a really nice job throughout this book of using stories and case studies to make it a little bit more relatable to what you may be going through in your organization. The second book I would suggest is Our Iceberg is Melting. I mean, if you love penguins, I'd say pick this up, right? Who doesn't love a cute little adorable penguin? So while we spoke about 5 seemingly simple steps, this book takes you through 8 stages and steps, and it's got a really great guide that you can leverage to work through. And it does a really nice job of relating it to how penguins are trying to navigate the challenges of finding a new home, right? So again, I love penguins, so I, of course, recommend that too. All right, the last one, Who Moved My Cheese? I mean, I'm sure, drop an emoji in there in the chat if you've ever read this. This is an oldie but a goodie. It's a classic, and it's entirely appropriate for any organization going through change. This one appeals to both leaders in your organization and individual contributors because it focuses on embracing the change rather than stopping and being stuck in fear because something changed and you weren't anticipating it. So it's a good refresher, and it's a quick read. So I highly recommend that. And if you know change is coming in your organization, read up on some things, right? These are just skill sets that you can further develop to be a strong leader, to take teams through organizational change. All right, that is the end of my prepared remarks and prepared content. Sammy, let's go ahead and get into some Q&A. And I believe we're going to leverage the Q&A aspect for this. And I'm going to open it up too, so I can.
Yeah. So if you guys have questions, make sure to post them in Q&A. And I think we have a couple in there already. So the first one somebody asked is, do you ever experience imposter syndrome and how do you deal with it?
I have never met anyone that has not experienced imposter syndrome. So I 100% have and do on a very regular basis. How do I deal with it is I remind myself of what I've accomplished to date. Even talking about this topic of change, who am I to lead an organization through change? However, I have to remind myself, I have years and years of experience. Someone just put in the chat, fake it till you make it and learn from it. I lean on my experience, right? So maybe there's a degree of fake it till you make it, but when you get to a certain point in your career, you definitely have experiences that you can lean on and quiet down that imposter syndrome, right? It's a good reminder to say, I am here for a reason. I am leading a group, if you will, for a reason, and I can do this, right? There may be some mistakes and missteps along the way, but to Felipe's point in here, you learn from that as well. And then you build that repertoire of experiences. And I would love to say that imposter syndrome goes away the further you get in your career, but that is totally false. It still creeps up even for me every now and then, but reminding myself of those experiences that I've had and the successes that I've had in leading teams, helps. It helps reflect on that and it quiets it down.
Awesome. Love that. For those that resist the change, how best to go about helping individuals see the vision?
Yeah, I think my gut reaction to this question is it's all about communication, right? You have to paint that picture for them to what things will look like on the other side of the change. You also need to acknowledge and have a better understanding of why that individual is resisting, because the resistance takes a different form for everyone. So listen, right? Put those listening ears on, ask some questions and understand why that individual is resisting, and then help calm those concerns and make them see that they have a role to play in this change. They are a very important part as an individual of getting to the other side of the change, and help them envision what their success will look like post-change.
All right, the Q&A is on fire, so we're just going to keep going. How do you handle a situation in which a leadership group aren't fully transparent and communicate information in part, but maybe not in full?
Yeah, that's hard, right? So if you have executives or leaders above you that are withholding information, it is going to be very difficult to fully and transparently communicate. And I think part of the message that you communicate down is that, hey, I don't have the answers. And then I would expect a leader to say, I'm going to go and ask for those answers, get some clarity. Ask more than one leader in the organization if that's appropriate for you, to try to get some more pieces to that puzzle, and let them know that, hey, my team's concerned and I don't have any answers for them. It needs clear communication. And there will be times when, let's say, senior leaders or executives are unable to fully communicate everything, but those details do come over time. So part of your message to the team can be, this is still evolving, and I commit to communicating with you as I get those answers. So hang with me in this change and we'll get through it together. That's a tough one.
Okay. And maybe another tough one. I don't know. You know way more than us, but how would you embrace a mandate from above that you must communicate or / deliver to your team, but are either missing the why, how, or maybe even disagree with the initiative?
Yeah, James, this happens often. It may have even happened during a time that you and I actually worked together. I'm not sure. That's a tough one, right? Because if you're going to be communicating to your team, you have to get behind the change. You have to find that small silver lining. You have to fully understand what's on the other side of it. And I would say if you don't understand the why, you've got to ask the questions, right? Sometimes it's okay to ask the difficult question, say, hey, I'm going to be communicating this on behalf of you. Please help me understand this so I can get my team on board and we can all navigate this change together. It's in terms of James not necessarily agreeing with the change, been there, been in that seat, and that's hard, but that's where I would challenge you to try to find the end goal. What could the team look like on the other side of that? And you have to go through that roller coaster of emotions on that change curve very quickly. And you have to recognize where you are and where you want to be so you can help navigate that with the team. It's a little bit of a non-answer, James, because it's every situation I think is unique, but ask the hard questions and try to find that silver lining on the other end of it if you don't agree with it.
Awesome. You mentioned being a transparent leader. How do you manage wanting to be as transparent as possible with your team against competing company priorities?
There are definitely a couple of my teammates on this call, and they may say Lori's transparent to a fault. So that has happened before. I think anything that's going on within an organization, if it is being talked about, really should be communicated down. And that's why I am such a transparent leader, and yeah, to a fault at times. So I think gathering as much information as you can, understanding what is okay to be shared at that time versus what's being shared with you as a leader. And sometimes that level of detail and information at varying levels of the organization is different. So I'm not even as a global vice president, I'm not always read into what the C-level understands. At some point, the CRO, who's my boss, will share more information with me when it's appropriate. So sometimes part of your message to your group is, hey, we're going to learn about things at the right time for the organization at this stage. I'm reading you into the fact that change is happening, and I'm going to share with you everything I can at this moment. So even just being transparent about how transparent you can be goes a long way with the team. It's hard.
All right. Awesome. What recommendations do you have for someone trying to move into a leadership position for the first time?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Sometimes getting that first rung of a management ladder and grabbing onto that first rung is the hardest thing you can do. So my recommendation is, first of all, make sure you're showcasing your leadership skills in the current role that you are. Find a project that you can showcase where you lead. You can lead people who don't even report to you. You might have multiple people working on a project. We do that all the time with our people that express interest in moving into managing teams. And the other thing I would suggest now is let it be known that you would like to move into more of a people leader type role, and make sure your understanding of why you want to do that is very clear with you, so you can articulate that to someone else. Because sometimes people think moving into management equates to lots of more money, and that is actually not always the case, especially at those lower levels of starting in the management ranks. So make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, right? My reason to my core was because I wanted to help other people succeed, and I wanted to have a bigger impact on their lives. That, in my opinion, is a really solid reason to move into leading people. But if you're going into leading people because you want to make more money, that's not a good reason to go in there. So I would say express your interest now and look for projects or ask for projects that showcase your leadership capabilities.
All right, looks like we have one more.
Excellent.
This one, it's kind of broad. How do you manage ambiguity?
It is broad. Yeah, sometimes on a big scale change, things are very ambiguous. And if you are someone who's responsible for either, well, I mean, anyone's responsible for either navigating the change for themselves or for a team, you need to get clarification questions. And this comes back to that being transparent. And it also ties into what is senior leadership willing to share at this stage of a change. We often find that people don't thrive in ambiguity. And as a leader, sometimes you need to find a way to thrive through that ambiguity, knowing the details will come. So I'm not really quite sure how to answer that one. If it's related to a particular scenario, it might be a little bit more helpful, but you've got to find a way to let people know that, hey, we don't have all those answers. And it is a little bit ambiguous right now, but we will make our way through it together. That's where a strong team pulls together and navigates it. Yeah, yep, Kim, exactly. Knowing that you're in it together and we'll all work through it together goes a long way. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think we're kind of wrapping up. We had a lot of great questions, a lot of great engagement in the chat. So thank you guys so much. I know Lori just took down that screen, but
Sorry.
no, it's okay. I was just going to say, if you want to connect with her, her LinkedIn's right there, but you can also just search. And we've also tagged her on our consensus LinkedIn before, so you can find her that way. But if you have any other follow-up questions, I'm sure she'd be happy to connect on LinkedIn and help you guys out. I just want to thank you, Lori, so much for lending us your time and your expertise. Thank you to all of our attendees for all the amazing engagement in the chat and the questions and the polls. We really appreciate you guys staying involved. We hope to see you guys at one of our upcoming DemoFest X events over here, Dublin, London, East Coast, coming up for the remainder of the year. Otherwise, we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.